Both Ukrainian and Russian authorities report attacks on their territories despite a unilateral ceasefire declared by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia launched multiple airstrikes using glide bombs in the Sumy region. And the governor of Russia's Lipetsk region reports drone alerts and attacks by Ukraine. Now, the ceasefire was supposed to go into effect on Wednesday at midnight. Ukraine had rejected the truce as, quote, theatrical play by Vladimir Putin, and instead offered to stop fighting for 30 days. But we can speak to DW's correspondent, Nick Connolly, directly from Kyiv for the latest on this. Nick, first of all, tell me what's been going on there overnight.
Well, here in Kyiv, it has been quiet. Claire, that is quite in contrast to the night before, where you had three basically waves of attacks, including ballistic missiles and drones and casualties. Ukraine's capital, for all the fact that it has the best air defense in the country, has seen pretty regular fatalities over the last few weeks, a real uptick in Russian pressure there. So that is different. But along the front lines, what we're hearing from Ukrainian soldiers is that, for the most part, fighting continues unchanged. We had one brigade telling us they saw fewer in the way of Russian infantry, but that drones and artillery were still being used. In some places, yes, it does seem like it's quiet, but there's a real sense of déjà vu here, that this is just the same as on Easter Sunday, when we had Vladimir Putin also announcing a 24-hour so-called ceasefire, which then, within a couple of hours, basically disintegrated.
Yeah, tell us more about that. From the Ukrainian officials you've been speaking with's perspective, why would you say we're seeing this one-sided truce offered by Putin now?
Well, there's definitely a sense that this is not about Putin wanting to end this war. People in Ukraine are still convinced that he thinks he can get more territory, carry on fighting, and basically continue his war that he thinks is on a roll. I think from a Ukrainian perspective, this is all about basically Putin needing a ceasefire for Red Square, where on the 9th of May, where tomorrow he's going to have some world leaders there. He wants to show that he is not isolated, that he is someone, a political and diplomatic force to be reckoned with, and he just doesn't need Ukrainian drone attacks on Moscow that have been getting more and more regular on that day to kind of spoil the images, the visuals of that. So there's a real sense that that is just about Putin wanting to have that propagandistic event on Red Square, let his international guests return home without any interference. We've seen Moscow airports closed because of Ukrainian drone attacks in recent weeks. So that is basically the only kind of explanation from a Ukrainian perspective as to why Putin wants to do this.
Okay, so the Ukrainians clearly seeing this as a farce. Zelensky has repeatedly said that Ukraine wants a longer 30-day-long truce. Would it have been in their interest to agree to what Putin is offering here with a shorter one, just for starters?
I mean, I don't think this is Ukraine ignoring this ceasefire. We haven't seen any major Ukrainian drone attacks on Moscow since this supposed ceasefire started at midnight. So, and I don't think it's really going to happen. We've had Zelensky leaving it open, not immediately agreeing to it, but I think it's not hugely likely that they'll do it, given their desire to maintain ties to China, to other countries that will be represented there in Moscow. But I think certainly there is a kind of real perception here of the blame game, right? Ukraine does not want to be accused by Trump or the wider kind of international community of not being open to peace. So they will go with these things, but they will also do their best, as they did last time around, to show that on the ground this is not being respected by the Russian side. It's obviously very difficult if you've got kind of troops just a couple of hundred meters apart shooting at each other with kind of small weapons fire, but they are doing their best to try and document these infringements, to actually then say, look, we played along with this, but it just wasn't happening on the ground.
DW's Nick Connolly in Kyiv. Thank you, as always, for that update.